All right, welcome everyone to our session today covering Invocation Framework and PIM. My name is Mark Sohm. I'm MSOM, the developer forum, so I may have been in touch with you out on the web there in the past. And we've got a couple other presenters joining me today.
Yeah, and my name is Kamel Ajili. Thank you for being with us. I'm a senior software application consultant, or whatever it's called. So I'm a platform evangelist. I'm based in Germany. Few of them knows me, so I'm happy to see all the old faces and new faces as well. So.
Okay, and I'm Ecke. I'm an independent software developer and software architect from Germany, living in Rosenheim. This is between Munich and Salzburg. And I think some of you know me. I'm writing, blogging, and I'm at conferences and have open source projects. And so today I will give you some examples how this invocation framework will work in a real application.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
I think because it's a special conference, so we are celebrating the launch of BlackBerry 10. We are doing it, let's say here, three guys of us here, and having Ecke from the community to talk about his own experience. And I would suggest every one of you, if you would like to participate and share your experience or whatever, feel free to do it. And the time will be very short, though.
Thanks. So we're going to kick things off with the invocation framework. So we're going to talk about the different parts of the invocation framework, how you can use that within your application. And the invocation framework allows your app to be integrated into other applications, as well as you can integrate other applications into your own application. So that's going to increase the discoverability of your application. It's going to increase efficiencies from the users, because they can make full use of that BlackBerry flow. So they don't have to go in and out of applications. They can use cards right within your application and get that seamless functionality. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is invoking other applications. So that's a way you can launch another application completely to take a certain task or action. You can also get invoked, and that'll be the next thing we cover, as well as finally there's cards, which are kind of a hybrid between the two. And we'll show examples of all of these. So the first type of invocation is what we call bound invocation. And this is where your application specifies a specific application to open and do a certain action. So in this example here, we've got a doc file, and we want the application called Dr. Doc to open this application. So within our app, we know the target, we know the type of file, we know what we want to do. We want to open the file. We send all that to the invocation framework. It takes care of launching the other application, and it's going to open that particular doc file. What that'll look like to the user is that they'll be able to bring the application right into theirs. So through that, you'll see a card come in. So it can show up as a card or as a separate app, and that'll slide right in on top. So you get the full BlackBerry flow experience there, and the user can drag to peek back to the original application. If we don't specify the application, we just specify the action and the type, the user will be prompted here for a list of choices of how they want to share that particular file. So here's all the applications that have registered with the invocation framework to handle that action and that file type. And you can plug right in here to have your application listed within that list as well. So the next type of invocation is called unbound invocation. And this is basically where you don't know or don't care about the application that's going to be invoked. So in this case, we're just going to say I have a doc file, I want to open it, someone take care of it for me. So you're handing off the decision making to the invocation framework, and it's going to go through and see if it has an application that's able to open that type of file. And if it is, it's going to choose one of the applications available and just launch that for the user. So the user doesn't get a choice, your application doesn't get a choice, but it's just a simple way. If you're not sure what application can open that, it's a way to easily handle that. So how that'll look, there won't be the same card process. It'll just open directly in the application, and there's no choice for the user to pick an application in the middle like we had in the previous screen. So it'll just open directly into that other app. So when we're invoking, there's four kind of pieces of information that you need to consider when you're going to create an invocation request. So we have, or four parts of the invocation request. We have the client, which is the application making the invocation request. We have the target, which is the application that's going to handle that. We have the action, what we want to do. Do we want to open it? Do we want to edit it? Do we want to maybe upload it? Or then we have the data. So this is what we're going to actually act on. So the action defines the task that you're going to do. So there's some built-in ones that we have, like open and edit, but your application can also specify its own custom tasks. So maybe you have an action to upload to a server. You could have a com.yourapplication.upload that's going to take a file and upload it to a destination server somewhere. The data is what you're actually going to work with, and there's two ways to specify that. You can specify it as a URI, so this could be a path to a file, it could be a URL to a website, whatever is appropriate to the invocation that you're doing. And that's what we call an out-of-band action. So the data has to be fetched from another location. The other thing we can specify is the data right within. So you can specify like a queue byte array to pass to the invocation framework, and that's going to act directly on that. That's typically useful for small amounts of data, but if you're doing any kind of large requests, then it's better to go the file route. The next thing we specify is the MIME type of our data, and that's important to help the invocation framework decide which applications can act on that particular piece of data. So the next thing is what we call cards. And cards is a way to kind of bring that other application functionality right within your app. So things like BBM chats, composers, previewers, and things like that, you can pull them right within your application. And that gives that user the whole flow experience where they can take their thumb and slide and peek back to the previous screen. There's three different styles of cards. We've got composers, previewers, and pickers, and they all slide in as sort of a screen or a card on top of your application, but they're going to appear a little bit differently to the users. So composers and previewers will slide left to right and allows that peek functionality. So this is similar to composing an email or using a chat or something like that. Pickers are when a user has to choose something. So that slides in from the bottom to the top. The user doesn't have that peek functionality. There'll be typically a cancel button on there if they want to abort that, because it's typically a moving forward action. It's not something they can just look at and jump back and forth. They need to choose something to move ahead within your application. So for previewers, here's kind of an example of what you can do and what the motions will be. So the arrow there shows how you can move the screen back and forth. So you'll be able to peek to the original screen as well as go back and forth between the card that you've placed on top of your current application screen. And so you can do this all without leaving your app. Makes it very efficient for the user. They don't have to jump and switch between applications. They can just stay right within the same app to do whatever action they want. So composers, as I mentioned, they go from bottom to top. So there's a screenshot of it halfway up right now. And you can see there's a cancel button on the top left there. So if the user wants to back out of it, it's going to basically break out of that current workflow and cancel their progress. Otherwise, they have to pick something to move ahead, and then it's up to your app or the application that you invoke there to handle that afterwards. So the previewers and pickers, again, they'll slide from left to right. If you want to go back to the application, there's two ways to do it. There's typically a back button in the bottom left corner, or they can slide directly to the right. And if they slide slightly to the right and let go, the card's going to fall back on top, so they're going to see the screen that they're on. If they slide all the way to the right, then it's going to remove that card and go back to the previous application. So we're going to do a demo here of invocation. So we're going to do two types of things here. So we're going to invoke the BBM application to send a file to another device. And on another device, we're going to open that file right from BBM. That's going to invoke our application that we've registered to that custom file type. And then we'll see it in action here. So what I've got is a modified version of the bucket list example. So this is one of the Cascade samples that's available on the BlackBerry GitHub site. And just to prove we're doing a live demo here, I'm going to create a new item. So someone want to give me an option that I should do to add to my bucket list here? What should I do before I die? Any suggestions? Find milk? All right. So what I've added here is an option to share. So I'm going to select the share item, and that's going to bring up the BBM contact picker. So on this device, I just have one contact, so contact from my other device. Add a little message there, and send it off. So what it's going to do is send start a BBM chat on the other side. I'm just going to switch the cable here. Switch over, okay. So what happened here, just as I was switching, is I just accepted to download the file. So there was an accept or decline button there. So this is your typical BBM chat to receive a file. And this could be any type of file. It could be an image. In this case, I've gave it a .buk extension. So it's a custom file extension that's handled by my application. So what I'm going to do now is just click on that gray area on the left there, this sort of file-looking item. And there we opened up the bucket list app to the addition screen to go find milk there. So we can hit save that, and it's going to add it to the bucket list example. So it's a way that we took our invocation on one side, invoked an application to do an action, and then triggered the invocation of our original app on the other device to go and open that particular custom file. So now we're going to look at how we actually did that. So we'll get into a little bit of code here to see how we sent that data and how we received that data. So to send the data, the first thing we're going to do is to create a file with a .buk extension. So that's what we're doing on the first line there. That's just a custom file type I use for the demo here. That could be whatever is appropriate to your application. And the next thing I'm going to do is create the invocation request. And that's what's happening on the next two lines there. So we're going to create the request with that file path that's in the original line there, as well as we're going to use the sys.bbm.share handler, which is a share framework to send over BlackBerry Messenger. The last thing we have to do is match our slot with the ARM signal, and that basically tells when the invocation should fire. So we take the actions there. And previous to this, I actually wrote out to that file. I didn't include it in the example here, since it's not relevant to invocation, but just writing it to a regular file. Now within that onArmed method, we're going to call the trigger, and we're going to say bb.action.share. That's going to open up BBM to share that particular file that we specified. So that's going to trigger that chat to appear as a card within your app, and the data ready to send. And the user can type in that message and hit send and fire it to the other recipient. On the other side, when we want to receive the data, we have to register a handler that's going to register to open those .buk files. So we do that within the bar.descriptor.xml for our application. So here we've added a custom file type there of .buk. We're going to say on the next line there that we're going to open the URL of file type. If we wanted to support other URLs like HTTP, you could add those there as well. So this is going to basically, when the application installs, register that information with the invocation framework. The next thing we have to do is connect the signal triggered by the invocation framework to a slot within our application, so we know that it's actually trying to invoke and launch our application. So we do that here, and we're going to tie it up to the handleInvoked method within our application. And handleInvoke is going to receive that invoke request object, and we're going to act on that. So it's going to have details about the invocation request. So in this case, we want to know where the file is that we're invoking. So we get the URL for that file. We're going to read in that file. And then finally here, we're going to set it to a variable and emit a signal that we capture in the QML side that's going to trigger the display of that particular page. So a pretty easy way to send data from one user to another. You don't need any backend infrastructure yourself. You don't need to worry about trying to find devices or network routes. You can just directly transfer that data over BBM. So a nice, easy way to share information with users. So now I'm going to pass it over to Kamal, who's going to cover the PIM portion.
Yep. All right, so. Okay, so I will give you an overview about the PIM APIs and how you can use them inside your application. So first of all, yeah, what is PIM? It's a little bit of probably marketing stupid thing. So PIM, personal information management, it's about events, about messages, contacts, nodes, and how you will be able to deal with that from within your application. So everything is defined in the domain BBPIM, let's say. So what can you do? You can create, you can read, update, delete contacts or calendar items or notifications, emails. You can register listeners to be informed when when something changed in the databases of contacts or calendars and so on. You can define filters. So the APIs are all similar. Let's say that's why they are all bundled in this domain, I would say. They are very similar. You can have cards, you can have pickers to pick contacts or calendar entries, etc. So we will see that in a little bit more details. So the first thing you need when you need to do when you like to have access to the PIM APIs is to modify your project file to add the PIM libraries. It's BB-PIM. If you don't have any extra libraries in your project, you would need to just copy-paste that into the project file. Normally, you have other libraries, then you would need to add the BB-PIM to that. The next thing which is required, so PIM is sensitive stuff, so your application needs to get allowance from the user that it needs to get access to the databases of contacts and calendars. You do that by adding this to the descriptor file. It depends if you need all of them or you only need, let's say, contacts then. You need to enter that into descriptor file so that when your application starts, the user gets asked, do you allow that application to access the contacts database or to access the calendar database? And only if the answer is yes, then your application will be able to access them. So contacts. So probably the most important object you would need to access the database is the contact service. You should create that service when your application starts, and you should keep it during the lifetime of your application. You just need one, and you can keep it the whole time. You do it, for example, here when your constructor is called, and you just initialize it then with the new core. So the contact service allows you, as I said, access to the database and access to the APIs as such. So this is here an example how to programmatically create a contact from within your application. So we need a pattern, the builder pattern. We use it because the contact is a complex object, I would say, and the builder pattern makes it a little bit easier to deal with all the data. So the builder methods, they can be chained one after the other because they all return a reference to the builder itself. So it's a little bit the Java style. So you have the set kind, set subkind, set value. You have, and then, for example, here you have created the first name. You can proceed with other attributes, and there is a lot of attributes. You find them all defined in contacts_const.hpp. And once you prepared all the data, so far nothing is persistent. The data becomes only persistent when you go ahead and create and call the create contact, which is a method of the service then. Okay, just zip. Excuse me. All right, so the next example is to show you how to read the contact and the data of the contact. So here again, you need the contact service, and then you create a contact details. You would need the contact ID here. So without the contact ID, you can't access that. So the question is, where do I get that ID? So either you know it because you have created the contact and you have stored that data, or you use some filter algorithm or filter mechanism to get a list of IDs of, let's say, contacts which are all having the email address rim.com or something like this. So you need the contact ID to get the data and then to display it then. Yeah, that's an example here. For example, how do I get the first name or the birthday? The birthday is a little bit complicated. So you have, first of all, you get a list of all the attributes which have a date object in them, and then you would need to go for each of those date objects and then a search for the birthday. So there are some easy attributes, easy to find attributes, probably others a little bit more complicated. You can as well delete contacts, you can modify contacts. When you modify contacts, you have to read them first, delete the old values, and then set the new values. Then I just had the two examples of create and read. Then listeners, so there are a bunch of listeners. Well, actually, there are signals and slots. That means if you like to be notified, there are new contacts has been added to the database, or contacts have been modified, or they have been deleted. You can get those signals and you can register for those signals. You implement the handlers on that, and then you treat the data. You get a list of all those new or modified contacts, and then you deal with it. That's possible. So the contact picker, so Mark was showing the pickers and the composers, etc. So you can have, from within your application, you can, let's say, fire up the picker and let the user select a contact, or multiple selection, or even you can filter the data which should be displayed in the contact, and you get a list of IDs, and then you can deal with those contacts. And how you would do it, first of all, you need to add the contact picker library to your project file, and then within the constructor, the first call you should do is to register the QML contact picker so that you have access to the contact service or the contact data then from within the QML before you create the QML object. Okay. So once you have registered or exposed that contact picker in the QML, then you can access it, and you can have for example, here that's just a simple example to show you get the contact ID, and then you display it here in a log, or you do whatever you want with it. I have a small demo, which is a small application. It's on our GitHub repository, so free source. Feel free to download it and have a look at the source code as well. So, what was the number 7 here? Okay. Yeah, that's a very simple application. It has a button. Once you click it, then it fires up the picker, and like Mark was saying, so it comes from the below, as you see. I have here, there are my 2 sons, then has 2 contacts, and if I go ahead and select one, it displays the contact ID. So, yeah, I can as well cancel the action, and yeah, just to show you how easy it is to get the contact picker card. Okay. And then it's 1, 2, or 3? PC. Okay. Thanks. So calendar. Here similar as well. For the calendar to access the database, the persistent data, you need to create a calendar service. You do it the same way as well in the constructor of your application. It looks a little bit horrible here, but it works then. So you create the invoke manager and the calendar service while you start your application. And then you keep them as long as your application is alive. We don't use the builder pattern for the calendar because the attributes are not very, there are not as many as in contact, so it's probably a little bit easier. But what you need for the calendar is the account ID. I can have several accounts in my device, and for every account I can have several folders, several calendars. So actually a calendar is identified by the account ID and then the folder ID. And then you can use a bunch of setter functions and to set the data or subject, location, start time, etc. Yeah, and at the end, you actually trigger the creation of the event by using the contact service services. So how do I get a calendar invoked from within my application? Getting a calendar card, let's say. Similar here, you have to add some libraries in your project file, and then you need to create here an instance of the invocation manager, and you keep it, and then you should hook it probably to the signal of when the card disappears, so that if the user makes a decision to get this or this appointment, then you get the data returned, and if you have the handler then and you know the card is disappearing, then you can process the data then. So this is how you would do it. You define an invoke request, that you define the target, you define the action, and this time it's just a pick. I would like to show the calendar UI and let the user pick an appointment, and I'd like to process the data out of that. Once this is done, you call the invoke method, and then you get the calendar displayed within your UI. It covers an UI. It doesn't mean you have 2 applications running. It's like Mark was saying, so you have that card embedded into your application. So because I registered on the on-child card done, that means when the user selects the appointment from the calendar and the card disappears, then my handler is called, and then I can copy the data and process it, do whatever I plan to do with it. So that's an example how do I programmatically inject contact into the calendar. So you have to prepare the data, so you have to have some key value pairs, let's say between the names and their values. You reach that by defining a map, for example, and then you need to invoke the calendar again with the action create here, defining the map type and everything. So there is a little helper here, this PPS object, which would encode the data in a way that our calendar can cope with it. And at the end, of course, you use the calendar, use the invocation manager to create the invocation request, in fact. And for here as well, I have a very simple demo. Feel free to download it, as I said. So the first thing is the pick event. So if I click on that, so I get the composer card. I have that event. I select it. Oh, sorry. Of course. Yeah, that's the application. First of all, to pick an event from the calendar, click on the button. I have now my calendar view. So if I minimize here, actually, I don't see the calendar application. No, that started before, actually. I don't see it anyway active. So it's the calendar UI is covering my application, or let's say it's embedded within my UI itself. So I pick that appointment here. What I do with the data now, just display it here in a known window. Compose event, so I have pre-populated some of the fields here. I can still change whatever here, informations, and then if I click on save, then the event is injected into the calendar. If I open the calendar, I should see it. Yeah, that's the test one. Okay. Yep. PC. So again, how much time do I have still? Okay. So the next one is the hub, and the hub is now available with the last OS update for you developers. So the notification framework allows you to access it, to create, edit, delete, put notifications in that hub. It allows you to let the LED flash, to give sounds when something happens, and let the device vibrate. Some people probably have the need to have some specific sounds for their notifications. Probably I wouldn't recommend that, so that the user experience stays the same. You can add entries in the hub and delete them or filter them. That's all possible. So that's a basic example. How do I create a notification and place it in the hub? So yeah, you would create a notification object and populate its data, like the title, the body, and prepare your invocation, and with the call notification notify, then the notification is inserted into the hub. If you don't specify a title, you will get the red star on your application icon, and then you don't have the notification into the hub. So there are a lot of, let's say, possibilities how to deal with those notifications. The last thing is about messages. How do I create messages from within my application, or filter messages, or delete messages? That's all possible. We have a bunch of APIs for that. The example shows how to create a message for 3 recipients. 2 of them should go to the to field, 1 of them in the CC field. So we have a bunch of helper classes, like the message contact, which manage the contact, like the name is telling, so the name and the email address and all of that. Then we use as well the builder pattern for here, because it gets a little bit, it can get a little bit complicated, and the builder makes it easier for us to chain all those calls and place the data, like the body, the recipients, and all of that. And with the message service, which again, like the contact and calendar service, needed and needs to be created only once, and it's recommended to do it at the beginning, you will be able to take the data and make it persistent, either by sending it or saving it. The one here is a very probably bad programming style. It refers to the account, let's say number 1. I can have, of course, several accounts, then I can decide which one to go with. I think you have a question? The example refers to email, SMS. Honestly, I'm not I'm not so sure if we have already the APIs to programmatically place an SMS.
I'm pretty sure they're available.
Yeah, okay. Okay, with that, I would like to hand over to Eke, who will be telling us about the real world and his experience.
Okay, so I have the easy part this time, only to demo some things. How does this look like in a real-world application? And I'm using the application from Open Data Space. The good thing for you is this application is open source. You will find it at BlackBerry GitHub, can download from there, and no problem to copy and paste what you need in your application. So I have integrated some of these examples that Mark told you about to invoke viewers, composers, and so on. So this Open Data Space application is a cloud service. So I have downloaded some files here. You see a sample PDF, and the next one will be, I have to repair this because there is a bug in the list view, will be fixed in 10.1 if you dynamically change data. Sometimes the list items displaying the wrong values. Data is correct bound, but the values are wrong. But it is fixed in 10.1, so if you run into this, it's not your fault. It's a problem with the list view and data binding from group data models if you dynamically insert and clear data. So, and I have developed this before BlackBerry 10 comes out, and there was no PDF viewer available, but I have developed and say, hey, invoke with this URI of this file and see what happens. And if I go here and say, take a look at this file, the PDF, now by magic the PDF viewer opens. I couldn't test this before, and I have the PDF viewer. I can pinch and zoom. Page 1 from page 1, only a small file here, and it opens in my application. There is no other application open, only my application, and I can peek back. There's my application still running. I can do all what is possible from the PDF writer, share with something, have menus there or so, or I'm going back to my application. So this is really cool. You have your application, you don't have to think about PDFs, you can use PDFs and you get the PDF viewer and it's integrated. The user doesn't know that you open another application. Same, I have a simple text file. This text file only contains some words. Before there was no viewer, nothing happens. Now I'm opening, and no, this file was opened by the Docs2Go. And here I have a text viewer displaying my text, and also I can do all what is possible there. Same could be with other kind of data. So I can, in this client application from Open Data Space, I have integrated BBM integration. And so I can say I want to start a chat about a file I'm working just on. And so here is the action. I can say start a chat. Then BBM was opened inside my application. You know, here, peeking back, I'm inside my application. I can choose one. I don't know if Roland has this his device on, and I can say, yes, I want to talk about this, send this out, and perhaps it will, if the Wi-Fi works also, should open there. So you have BBM integrated. Really easy. Also, there's another function. I will not do this here because the Wi-Fi is so slow. sharing a link, then I'm taking a file, uploading this to the cloud service, getting back a URL to download, and I'm sharing this link to one of my BBM contacts. All is integrated into this application here. So there are other viewers possible. Here I have a movie file. It is a file from OS X. It's a QuickTime movie, and of course a QuickTime movie also runs on a BlackBerry 10 device. And if I open this one, the player opens, the video player opens, I can switch, and I have all what is possible from the video player. And my customers like this, then they don't know that I have not to code this. Only 3 lines of code or so, and it works.
That's the money you get for your application?
It's an open source application. Everyone can pull out and copy things from here. And I think this was another file. Yes, this was a audio file. It's the same.
Thank you.
So, opens really short and plays it, and you can stop and go forward, back, and so on. It's really cool way to extend your own applications with all the features the BlackBerry 10 gives to you. So then it's easy to see what you have to do. Only really some lines of code, and in the moment I have here, you see I have the picture viewer, and I'm doing in this case an unbound invoke, only getting the file path from the file picker and sending this to the invocation framework, and by magic PDF comes up, and the docs to go comes up, and the image viewer comes up, and so this is a cool way to use this. Here are other parts of the code. There's an bound media player invocation, and also only some lines of code. And here's an unbound invocation, or here's the invocation of the browser. I will demo this soon, what you can do with the browser. And all is included here. And this time makes it easy to present. I don't have to switch to my PC to show you the code. I only uploaded the image file and demo this here. So, okay. So another thing. Then, of course, I have integrated BBM, and I can invite others to BBM. I want to use my features to discuss about things. Or I can say I have one BBM contact and I want to invite him to download my application. And so here is a link to the app world, can send this. And so the colleague will be directed directly into the BlackBerry world and can download the application. Or another important thing, you are thinking your application is a good application, then it should be easy for your users to leave a review in the BlackBerry world. Yes, it's the same, only 3 lines of code or so, and yes, the Wi-Fi is slow. But if it's working, don't know, then the BlackBerry world opens directly at your application and the user can leave a review there. Seems that the Wi-Fi is too slow. Okay, you see the BlackBerry world is opened. So another thing, you cannot only use the invocation framework to use parts of other applications, you can also provide your own functionality. And I have done this, and there's also an open source application to see how this works. And you have to know if your application provides functionality to others as cards or so, then your application can be started multiple times. Important to know, if you're working with singletons or have some variables, you have to think about this. And also, at startup of the application, you can check if you are started as a normal application, user clicks this on his own home screen, or if the application was started from invocation, open application, or as a card to preview. And then you can decide, and I decide, for example, and for my complete application, I have a complex QML file to start. But if I know I'm opened via a card invocation, I only need a small portion of my functionality, so I have another QML file. And so at the startup of the application, I test, am I invoked or normally started? And if I'm invoked as a card, I open another QML file, which is much faster and needs less memory. So this application is here. This sample only demonstrates that you can write an own application and use the open dataspace application to upload this to the cloud. Here I have the file picker. I choose some file to upload. Here I have the file, and now by magic in the action bar the ODS upload comes up. Because if you have a special action item for the to invoke something, it is only visible if the query gives you a result. And now we have a PNG file, and my application is registered for PNG files, and I say, hey, I want it to upload, and then my application comes in and says log in, but okay, the Wi-Fi is slow, won't do this, and you can peek back, you can go back, and all these things. So your application can become part of other applications. And I'm working on another business application for a customer where my complete business application is built by modules, and each module can be invoked as cards in the main application, and then you can have different models for payment, for the billing, and so on, and create really flexible modular systems. I will blog about this in the next weeks. So, last thing I can not demo because of the slow Wi-Fi. There's also a way to invoke the BlackBerry Maps and to get a route. And then the map will open, and with the route from your application, it's also a really cool way to do things. And so I think this should be a short impression what is possible with the Invocation Framework in a real-world application to enhance your application. You write a small part of code, and you use all these cool features from the BlackBerry 10 operating system. And take a look at this, BlackBerry, GitHub, Open Dataspace, you will find it there. And if you like Open Dataspace, there's a free account for 2 GB dataspace and 5 users, and all data is encrypted there. You can use it in your own application, and so have fun with the Invocation Framework. Mark?
Thanks for that demo. Now we'll open it up for questions for the last few minutes here. So if there's anyone has any questions for any three of us on any of the topics, one in the back, we'll just get you the microphone so everyone can hear.
Okay.
There we go.
Am I able to register my application to actually handle directories and not files by using a mimetype or something?
There's two ways you can register to be invoked. It's either by file type, MIME type, or a combination of both. So you can do either one.
Yeah, but what if I want to open a directory? Is there some kind of type I can use?
I don't think so for just a directory, no.
Okay.
You could possibly do some kind of card request that way and just invoke your application directly with that path, but it wouldn't be triggered directly, like based on a MIME type. You'd have to know the target of your application. So you could say, I want to invoke my application, here's the data, and you could pass in a path at that point, but the calling application would need to know that your app is the target to do that.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? You got one now.
Is the invocation schemas for context available outside of Qt for other environments, the raw definitions, other than what's embedded in Qt?
Okay, so
That makes sense.
the APIs I was talking about, they are all available on the C++ side. They are not available on the QML side, so except the invocation of the picker. But you are asking if you have access through the C level to some
No,
context
just the
then?
definitions, the invocation definitions.
So invocation you can do from any of the languages, like any platforms. For creating contact directly, you need to use the Qt or C APIs. But as far as documentation goes of the parameters for all the invocation types, we have a bunch of them up for the Qt and QML side right now. They're working on adding those for Air and some of the other platforms. I'm not sure which ones we exactly have online, but I know the end goal is they're going to have documentation for all languages like Air, WebWorks, and
Do you have
the
an
native.
ETA on all that?
Not off the top of my head, no. Just
Apologies if you already mentioned this, but you mentioned a bunch of different languages, but you didn't mention Android runtime.
You can use invocation through Android runtime via the intents that Android uses. So anything that can map there directly can be lined up, but we haven't added any BlackBerry specific APIs or anything to the Android side. So things that we can map directly, some of those will work. So I'm not sure what the list is off the top of my head. Again, all the ones that we do support, but you can invoke some things from Android.
When my application is launched as a card, in which sandbox does it run? In the target, the application that it targets, or my own sandbox?
So so when you're passing the data across, your application is always going to run in its own sandbox. But if you're passing in, say, a file, say if application A is calling application B, application A can say, I want to invoke application B with this image file that's in my sandbox. And the invocation framework will take care of taking that file and mirroring it in the other application sandbox. So you don't have access to the calling app sandbox, but you'll have access to the data. The framework will make sure that's seamless. You don't have to copy your images to like a shared area or anything like that where the user can see them and all the apps can see them. The invoke framework can handle moving that data between the two sandboxes for you.
Okay, and my application B can use its own settings. Okay,
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll get you the mic here. Yeah.
Will I add on to that? Does that mean you can't modify data? That'll be mirrored, because you use the word copy and mirroring. Say you passed an image, you want to edit the image and then go back.
If you wanted to go back, then you'd have to use some sort of shared area. It wouldn't be, you're not working on the copy from the original.
Right. That's what I was wondering. Thanks.
I have an idea for BlackBerry and I want to know if it is applicable or not. What about adding the concept of invocation framework to the app world? For example, when I open a PDF file and I don't have the player for PDF, the device itself recommends players from the app world. For now, to invoke a file from the device, you read all the bar file, the descriptors, and you know what is the real app. What about adding this feature to the app world?
Yeah, it's definitely a good idea. We've had it suggested by a couple other people at the conference here as well, to be able to allow the user to open up App World to say, hey, there's nothing on your device that opens this type of file. here's some applications on App World that could, and let them choose from that. So something we'll definitely take back to the App World team and recommend. Yeah, definitely a good idea.
I have a question on the message service. And is it always compulsory that you need user interaction in order to send a message?
No, you can do it. The example I showed actually is completely programmatically sending the message.
But it does pop up a dialog to the user which requires a user interaction before the message is actually sent.
You mean the UI will be displayed and then you have to click on the send button then?
My context is an alerting application, which would be rather useless if somebody actually needs to do something.
I'm not sure. I have to go back with you with that later. No, I'm not sure. Okay. I'm not sure. There can be some security considerations on that. I'm not sure. So.
Right.
I have a question also about the PIM area. It's possible to have multiple accounts, and the accounts are backed up by different providers, right?
Yeah.
Like you have Facebook provider and so on.
Yeah.
It looks like these providers are implemented as single plugins, so it seems to be extensible. Are there any plans to make this API public, so that it's possible to implement your own providers, to integrate your own social networks into BlackBerry?
At the moment, I think that's not possible. I don't think I'm not sure if it's on the roadmap, but currently no.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
A while back when Invocation was first introduced, there was talk about having something on the forums to allow people to post their invocation schemas to be targets for other apps.
Yep.
Can you talk about if that's still...
Yeah, it's still planned. They're looking into having a dedicated website where third-party developers could go and post information so you could share your invocation with one another. Our first step is documenting our own invocation across all the items, and after we've got that upline and online ready to go, they're going to start working on a website. So it is planned for this year. That'll be after we get all of our own types up there. Question behind you in the back.
What if two applications are registered for the same file type or MIME type?
So it depends what type of invocation you're going to do then. So if you do actually I guess there's three ways you can handle that. So if you do an invocation, you say, I want this application to open it, then that's the app that the user is going to see open the application. The other option is to do that bound invocation but not specify a target. So when you do that, the user gets that list, so they can choose which app they want to open it in. And the last is the unbound, where the application tosses it over the fence and says, something open this. And then the invocation framework just picks one. So it depends on the calling application how it's going to be handled that way.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? In the back.
Okay, 5 minutes ago.
Very short question about the permissions. If you use the Invocation Framework, for instance, to open a contact card, do you need to add the permissions to your bar definition or not?
There's permissions specific to the Invocation Framework, so you'd have to ask for those permissions.
Okay.
You don't need to worry, I don't believe, about the permissions for the calling applications, because that's run in the other application sandbox then.
Because I was trying an error application, and some invocations were just working as documented, and others didn't work at all, and I didn't get any feedback, so I wondered maybe I need to...
Yeah, I don't think so. Again, I might have to double check on that. I don't believe you have to change any of that. But one thing, if you're testing on a dev alpha, you might get no response for some things, because the dev alpha doesn't have all the applications, so you can't do things like it doesn't have a phone. So if you try and invoke the phone, nothing's going to happen. But if you try it on a real device, then you'll see that. It's kind of what Eki was mentioning. When he was developing, he didn't have anything to open PDFs. And then once you got the full version, it just started working then.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, okay, any other questions?
I just wanted to say that those little applications, they will be posted on the event archive or the on-demand portal. So in case you would like to download them from there, but they are available in GitHub as well, along with the presentation. And,
Okay, I think that's it for questions. So thanks everyone for coming out. We will be around, so if you do want to talk to us one-on-one, please still be here.